Do you believe that racism exists?
I do.
And
Now,
why do you,
it depends
why,
on the definition of racism that you're using. So if you're using the definition of racism from, previous or prior to this new definition, the old definition being it's an attitude of heart, it's an individual issue where, someone may choose to join the KKK, or someone may choose to join the Black Panther movement and have, issues toward whites and hold this, ethnic partiality in their heart with hatred and all of those things. Yes, I believe that racism exists, and I believe that it always will exist because we are sinful humans and racism is a sin. Now, if we're looking at more of this current definition of racism, of prejudice plus power, I am not in favor of that definition because that means that people without power can't be racist. I personally, as a Christian, don't believe that there's a sin that someone cannot commit if they are inclined toward that particular sin. So, and the jury's out on this. So you would have many critical race theorists who would say, well, because you're a minority, because you're Black, you have no power. You can only have racial bias. Or you can get someone like Ibram Kendi who says, well, I don't believe that, Blacks don't have power, and so Blacks could be racist. The bottom line is that racism truly is an issue of the heart. We can talk about systemic issues, but when it comes down to who can I personally present hatred toward and ethnic partiality toward and slander and all of those things, anyone can be racist, regardless of skin color.
as a Christian, you believe racism exists?
I do.
And
As a Christian, I believe that.
does the scripture say that racism exists?
The scriptures do not specifically say, do not be racist.
No, does it say that racism exists?
The scriptures say that humans are sinful. And so if humans are sinful, there isn't a sin that would be left out. So when you ask if the scriptures say that racism exists, the scriptures would talk about racism in regards to things like ethnic partiality. The way that we understand race and talk about race today, the scriptures really don't talk about race in that regard. The scriptures talk about nations or ethnicity and things like that. But to talk about race the way that we do in 2023 America would be anachronistic to what the scriptures are talking about. The scriptures talk about people groups. Think of Abraham from Ur of the Chaldeans. This gives us insight into how close he was to the covenant with God or how far away he was. What was the region that he came from? It wasn't specifically talking about Black, white, Hispanic, Asian American. That isn't how the scriptures refer to people. If the scriptures did mention, someone who might have dark skin, it would be no different than saying, oh, the tall person over there, or oh, the short person over there. It wasn't speaking of race the way that we understand race today. So no, there's no scripture that says this is racist or do not be a racist.
Right.
But we do see many principles in the scriptures that tell us that we shouldn't hold ethnic partiality. So I shouldn't treat someone with favoritism because of the color of their skin or lack of favor because of the color of their skin.
So I'm Black and slow. So let me ask. So does the scripture say racism exists, period?
The scripture does not talk about race the way that we do. So in order for me to affirm or deny that the scriptures say racism exists, I would have to then anachronistically insert race into the books of the Bible, and I can't do that.
Yeah,
so what I can say,
because of time here, and I'm Black and slow, does the scripture say racism exists?
I cannot say that. The scriptures do not say that. The scriptures do not refer to race. The scriptures refer to ethnicity.
So is that a yes or no?
Again, Mr. Peterson, to say that the scriptures say racism does or does not exist, the scriptures don't refer to race. And so, no, the scriptures wouldn't say racism exists because it doesn't refer to race the way that we do.
And so as a Christian, why would you use the same language that the children of the lie, the children of the devil use? They use the word racism in order to cover up the hatred of their hearts and to work on behalf of the devil, to worship the devil. Why would Christians use the same language that the children of the devil use, like the word racism?
Well, at the Center for Biblical Unity, we usually use the word ethnic partiality for your audience, because ethnic partiality is not something that is a widely used term. I would use the term racism, but I also define it and offer caveat to say it is ethnic partiality mixed with hatred, mixed like ethnic hatred, ethnic slander. It is not to use, sociological terms. I believe one of the things or issues that are present within the church today is that we have adopted many of the sociological terms from culture or from the university and education system, and we have imported those things into the church. But truly, the scriptures do not talk about race the way that we do.
So does the scripture say we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and wickedness, and that our battle is a spiritual battle? It's not a physical battle at all, but it's a battle between good and evil. Does it say that?
Yes, it does tell us that our battle is spiritual.
So as a Christian, why don't Christians say that rather than saying what the children of the lie say? Because when you call it racism, you're covering up the devil, and most people are never going to look at themselves to see that their hearts are wicked and they need to be born again of the heart. But if Christians call the devil for what he is, instead of using the devil children words, you can help more people there because they are more likely to look at themselves.
Well, I honestly
but why do
think
Christians
that,
use the same word as the children of the devil?
well, I can't speak for every Christian, but I do think that there are many Christians who have adopted the critical social theories. I think that there are many Christians who have adopted, a narrative that comes from academia. One,
I know,
but two, I think that there are.
You are a Christian, and you're using the word racism instead of a battle between good and evil. Because the blacks used to know this, and they taught us that too. It's either right or wrong. It has nothing to do with color at all. It's egos and it's of the devil. Why don't you, for example, why don't you say that rather than racism, period?
Well, I think because I want to also communicate in a way where people can understand what I'm saying. And so as a believer, part of my role when we look at Matthew 28:19 is to go out and to evangelize. And so if I'm only using words that are understood by other Christians, I will be missed by those that I'm really trying to reach. Yes, it is a heart attitude and it is a sin attitude, and I want to go in with the gospel, and I do go in with the gospel, but I can't make my speech so lofty that I miss the people who I'm actually going out to minister to or to bring Jesus to.
But
and so when you ask,
Christ didn't use the words of the devil, and Christ didn't use soft words to try to reach certain people. He just spoke the truth, and those who were seeking could hear the truth and overcome. He didn't use words like racism, or he didn't use worldly words. Most people didn't even understand what he was talking about. So he didn't change his language just to try to reach everybody. He only was looking for those few that were seeking him.
I don't think that it's about changing my language. Let me put it this way. We don't use the King James version of the Bible in many churches today. Why? Because we also understand that there is something to being able to reach people with language. So I have to use the language that I have to be able to explain to people and bring people along. What I don't want to do is just cut off any possibility of being able to have a helpful conversation that can bring someone closer to the cross or closer to Jesus. And so to be clear, when I say racism, I often offer the understanding of this is what I mean by racism. It's exactly what I did here in my conversation with you. When you said, why do you use the word racism, or do you believe that racism exists? My first word was, well, it depends on what you're referring to, because I never want to mislead someone into thinking that as we have shifts in definition, that this word here, racism, is the same thing as this word here. It is always important to be clear. I cannot cannot defend the faith once for all given to the saints without having clarity. And so, as I completely agree with you, that we need to, one, have clarity, and two, we do need to be using the language of the scripture and understanding that this war that we're fighting is not just a physical war. But I cannot use such lofty speech as the Pharisees did in the New Testament, that they would go around praying and using lofty speech, as Paul talks about, or even as Jesus talks about, that people will not understand.
Let me say this because of time, but Christ didn't use fancy words. He didn't try to use certain words to make sure somebody understood it. He just spoke the truth, and he spoke in what they call parables. And he didn't care if they heard it, fine. If they did, fine. Those who were seeking him were able to understand it. And he even said, you know what? It's the few that's going to find this and understand my language. Most will not. And
But
so
Mr.
he didn't change
Peterson,
his language just to try to pull somebody to the cross.
I disagree. When he spoke to the Pharisees, he spoke in parables. When he spoke to the Samaritan woman, he spoke plainly. When he spoke to the people who were of what I guess I'll call pagan, or Gentile, that would be a better word. When he spoke to the Gentiles, it was plain. He said, "Suffer not the little children come to me." He went and made it plain. He made an easy access so that people could understand there is a way made back to the Father. When he spoke to the Pharisees, he spoke in parables and language that they did not understand because their hearts were not ready to
But that's
receive
not
it.
true. He spoke to the Pharisees because he understood that they were preaching the Bible and carrying on, but their hearts were wicked. And so on the outside, they presented themselves as children of God, but on the inside, their hearts were wicked.